my channel, The Mental Traveler. I'm Caro Herrera, and today I'm going to be reviewing the first two novels of the Barsetshire series, as well as their 1982 adaptation. But what are the Barsetshire series? They're a series of 6 novels, written by Anthony Trollope, published in the middle of the 19th century, and today they are considered English classics. As I said, I'm only going to be talking about the first 2 books here, but the titles of all the novels are the following: The Warden, Barchester Towers, Dr. Thorne, Frimley Parsonage, The Small House at Ellington, and The Last Chronicle of Barset. Also, in 1982, the BBC adapted the first 2 novels into a 7-episode series called The Chronicles of Barchester, starring Alan Rickman, Nigel Hawthorne, Donald Pleasance, Geraldine McEwan, Barbara Flynn, Susan Hampshire, among others. So yeah, before I begin reviewing them, let me just say that this will be a spoiler-free video, so you can sit back and enjoy. I'm going to read you the Goodreads summary of book 1 and 2 because I really like them. I think they send a clear message as to what the story is about. So yeah, the first book is called The Warden, and this is a plot. The Warden centers on Mr. Harding, a clergyman of great personal integrity who is nevertheless in possession of an income from a charity far in excess of the sum devoted to the purpose of the foundation. On discovering this, young John Bold turns his reforming zeal to exposing what he regards as an abuse of privilege, despite the fact that he is in love with Mr. Harding's daughter, Eleanor. It was a highly topical novel. A case regarding the misapplication of church funds was a scandalous subject of contemporary debate. But like other great Victorian novelists, Trollope uses a specific case to explore and illuminate the universal complexities of human motivation and social morality. And then, as to book 2, Barchester Towers, the one that I'm going to be studying in my class, this is the summary. Trollope's comic masterpiece of plotting and backstabbing opens as the Bishop of Barchester lies on his deathbed. Soon a pitched battle breaks out over who will take power, involving, among others, the zealous reformer Dr. Prudy, his fiendish wife, and the unctuous schemer Obadiah Slope. Barchester Towers is one of the best-loved novels in Trollope's Chronicles of Barchester series, which captured 19th century provincial England with wit, worldly wisdom, and an unparalleled gift for characterization. Okay, so ever since I was a kid, I've loved British history, watching period dramas, watching British actors performing, and I've also been a huge fan of Alan Rickman since I was a kid because of his portrayal first of Colonel Brandon in Sense and Sensibility, and then of Severus Snape in Harry Potter. So when it comes to the Barsetshire series, I was introduced to it thanks to the adaptation. I just don't recall if I found out about it because of Alan Rickman, and I may have been looking through his filmography, or because it was a BBC period drama. But yeah, anyway, I remember that when I was a teenager, I tried to watch this show, but I abandoned it because I was mostly into love stories, and I wanted to read Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, not this story about clerical churchmen. I didn't really understand it back then. Still, for some reason, I never quite forgot the Barchester Chronicles, and since I love reading, and English classics are among my favorite sort of literature, at one point I ended up buying the Barsetshire series, thinking that one day I would read it and give it a try. Okay, so yeah, pausing here. For many, many years, one of my biggest dreams has been to study English literature at Oxford, and it's a bit hard to do that in person. So at first, I was like, okay, I'll take a course that lasts one day whenever I'm back in England visiting. Wouldn't it just be awesome to learn about, for example, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and their works at the place where they actually learn and taught? I think that Oxford is like the center of English literature. I may be wrong, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, in June 2020, after months of quarantine, I was like, okay, I've got to start to take some classes. And I had considered a long time ago to take some continuing education courses online from Oxford, but I had been hesitating for a while, but now I was like, this is the time. So I looked them up and I saw this really fascinating course on Victorian literature that studies the works of Charles Dickens, Great Expectations, Thomas Hardy, Far from the Madding Crowd, and they're like 2 of my favorite English classics ever. But this course also analyzes Scenes of a Clerical Life by George Eliot, and I've never read anything by Eliot, and it analyzes Trollope's The Barchester Towers, which is the second book of the Barsetshire series. So before I bought the course, I was like, okay, I'm gonna see if I enjoy the story of the Barchester Towers, because otherwise I'm going to be reading books that I don't really feel at the moment I care for. So yeah, the 80s adaptation is online, and I saw it in like 2 days because it was really good. I'm so happy that I ended up loving it, and after I finished it, I was like, okay, I'm gonna read the book, and I'm gonna take the course. So now I can say that I'm an Oxford student, even though my class begins until September, and I'm really excited to see what I learn about the Barchester Towers that I didn't really pick up during my first read of it. Also, I did consider doing this video after I'd taken my course so that I could give a more in-depth analysis of it, but I'd rather give you my personal views right now. And after my class, I'm going to be doing a video where I focus on what I learned about all of these novels that I mentioned. Okay, so I'm gonna be reviewing the series first. The first 2 episodes cover the first book, The Warden, and the other 5 cover what happens in Barchester Towers. Overall, I give it a 5 out of 5 stars review because I really fell for it, and I think it's a pretty good adaptation. I do get though why I didn't find that plot interesting back when I was a teenager, because it wasn't full of romance, but I'm glad to report that now that I've matured, I had no problem with that. I could actually appreciate what the plot does deal with. But yeah, I love the performances, the settings, costumes, the dialogue, the latter, because in the book there aren't that many exchange of conversations between people, so the screenwriters did a pretty good job of adapting what the author is telling us rather than showing us into dialogue for the show. But yeah, as to the performances, I think that everyone did a really good job. They really owned their roles, particularly Nigel Hawthorne as Archdeacon Grantley, Geraldine McEwan as Mrs. Prouty. Still, my favorite thing about the series was Alan Rickman. I can't help it. And I mean, it was just so refreshing to see him looking so young. And I mean, he's so talented in the Barchester Chronicles. He's talented in everything, but he really seems to be enjoying playing the role of Obadiah Slope, to the point that I was actually rooting for him, even though he's like the antagonist sort of bad guy of the story. But yeah, moving to the books, The Warden and Barchester Towers, I give them both a 4.5 out of 5 stars review, only because they weren't books that I utterly fell in love with, to the point that they're not my favorite English classics, but they're just still pretty good books. And I must confess that I did enjoy the show more than I did reading the books. But I think that this was in part because after being in isolation due to quarantine since March, I'm recording this in July, and I've seriously read like 40 books or more since quarantine started. I think that I was reading Barchester Towers at a point where I was a bit fed up with reading so much. Like, I needed to clear my mind. So I did find myself struggling to keep on reading Barchester Towers because of this. But yeah, I still prefer the plot of Barchester Towers to the plot of The Warden. But in general, I really enjoyed the fact that the author wrote this new place in England called Barsetshire, filling this small little world with his quirky characters and intriguing plot lines. Sort of like what Thomas Hardy does with Wessex in his works. But yeah, I think that this technique of his was like an ode to literature and to his imagination and to the romance of Victorian literature. And because we're going to deal with studying a lot of the church aspect of the books in my Oxford class, I tried to analyze that things I was reading the books, something I might not have done otherwise. And with this, I think they mean that we're gonna analyze the sort of hypocrisy and self-interest that men of the Church of England were examples of in these stories. I must say, though, that there were some things that I didn't quite love about these 2 books of the Barsetshire series. I mean, the plot was interesting, the characters were engaging, setting was delightful, but I don't like the fact that the author doesn't use that much dialogue between characters. I mean, I love watching certain exchanges between Slope and other characters in the show, and then I didn't even get to read those lines in the book. It was just like telling us what was happening. And as to Obadiah Slope, I really love him, even though he's the antagonist of the story. Sure, a big part of it is because I love Alan Rickman, but I also think it's because the author is just so set upon constantly reminding us that Slope is the bad guy that I got annoyed about it. And I was like, okay, you think he's so bad, I'm actually going to root for him, because he just wouldn't shut up about it. I mean, at one point I was like, is he pointing his finger at Obadiah Slope on purpose as a sort of way to make the readers pay more attention to him and not dislike him so much? Or does he really just like to make fun of him and point out that everyone hates him and that like the worst human being ever? I mean, the author does use satire techniques to mock the low church, so maybe, as I said, he's doing that when he's constantly criticizing Slope. But I mean, I love characters that are great, that are complex, that have depth, so I didn't really buy the fact that Obadiah was just evil, or cunning, or ambitious, or selfish. There must be some good qualities about him, and even if there weren't that well developed, he was still a very fascinating character to read about, and I think that everyone remembers him for a reason. Another thing that I don't like about the author's writing style, the fact that he would be having 2 characters have a conversation, or he would be telling us what was taking place in the plot, and then he would just suddenly interrupt that and start rambling about other stuff, that it was really distracting. It would interrupt the action of the plot. And I mean, one of my favorite books ever is William Thackeray's Vanity Fair, a novel without a hero, and he's also a writer of satire, and he also does this. He would be interrupting a scene to talk about this, I don't know, funny philosophical topics. And I don't know, I find his writing style really funny and entertaining. But Trollope would actually be like writing a fight between two characters, and then he would interrupt the scene and be like, oh, if only this character hadn't slapped this other character, this would have happened. Or if this other character had left the room before this had happened, all of this would have taken place. Alas, none of them did these things, so we have this taking place instead. So that was really annoying in my opinion. Like, we get all of these different scenarios of how the story could have ended up being like, and I'm like, okay, just stick to the one that you decide in the end. Don't constantly tell us all of the ways that you wanted to end the scene. And I mean, it couldn't, at the first I found it a bit cute that he did this, but it was just too much for me. Still, his books are really popular and they're great English classics for a reason, so I do encourage you to read his books and make your own opinions about his writing style, because even though I didn't like these things about his technique, I still really love the plot and the characters, so that weighs more with me than the writing style. And overall, I think that this is a really cute, nice escape reading, not in the sense that they're short and light, because they're really long books and there are many books and they have plots you have to pay attention to, but they're more like an escapism method because they deal with these charming English towns with characters that in the end, you know, are going to get what they deserve. If they're good characters, they're going to end up happily ever after. If they're not, they're going to get what they deserve, as I said. So yeah, it's nice to escape to a place where you know that the outcome is going to be happy when so many bad things are happening in the world. Okay, so I do plan to read the rest of the Barsetshire series one day. I've seen the latest adaptation of Dr. Thorne and I hope to read the book soon. But whenever I do read other novels, I'm gonna review them separately and then make a playlist where you can find all of the reviews for the Barsetshire series. But yeah, for the moment I believe that this is all I have to say about these stories. Thank you so much for watching my review of them. Please let me know if you enjoyed it or not, as well as what are your own thoughts regarding the books, adaptations, the author. Also, in the description box below you can find a link to the books 1 and 2, their Goodreads page, as well as a link to that show's IMDb page. And well, I'm Caro Herrera, the Mental Traveler, and I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you're in the world. I'll be seeing you soon. Take care and goodbye.